This is Art LABOE, and I regularly read Music Connection magazine, and I sure hope you do too.
All right, we've got more dedications here. I got a dedication coming in from someone from Music Connection magazine. Adam Seyum did an article on me this week. We had an interview, and it's going to come out in Music Connection magazine soon. When it does, I'll be announcing that on the air and let you know what issue it's in. In the meantime, I have a request from Adam Seyum. He did the article to his friend Yadira. And he wants to hear I Pledge My Love for You, Yadira. So here it is.
And I definitely, appreciate you taking out the time to conduct this interview with me.
Well, I appreciate you thinking I'm important enough to be in your magazine.
Oh, most definitely. You're very important. You're the king of radio broadcasting.
Well, that's sweet of you to say that.
We'll start off with the first question. So being creatively well-rounded, what do you enjoy doing the most? Is it DJing, songwriting, or producing?
Well, I've done them all. I've done DJ work, or at least I've been a radio announcer since 1943. In those days, there was no such thing as a DJ. We were just announcers. That when there was space on the station, we would play big bands and announce the records. But the answer to your question is, I still like being on the radio and talking to listeners live. The way I do it, that I start picking up on that. Actually, I did it in one of my first jobs in San Francisco back in 1943, but we didn't have equipment to talk to people back and forth, so the listeners couldn't get on the air, but I would kind of echo what they say. I would say, okay, I remember the first one I ever talked to, a girl named Merle in San Francisco, and I said, well, Merle, what would you like to hear tonight? And then she would tell me. Maybe she'd want to hear some old song by, Benny Goodman or something. And I would say, oh, she wants to hear something by Benny Goodman. So I would mouth what they were saying, too, because we didn't have equipment that would put people on the air. Nobody did. So I still, the thing that stands out that I still like to do is talk to the listeners that are listening to the show, and that's what I like the best.
That's cool. That's real cool. And I'm sure that's another reason why, you still have listeners in the sense of them resonating with you, because you're still, not out of touch. You're still able to communicate with them one-on-one, and it's a real connection that you bring upon them. So that kind of leads me into my next question. So how does it feel, to be the pioneer in on-air dedications for frequently requested songs?
Well, it feels good. It always feels good to be accepted by the listeners and people in the business. So I would just have to, make it a simple answer. It feels real good to be accepted and to do these things and talk to people. And I'm a pretty outgoing person, so I do enjoy talking to people and usually try to find out what they're interested in. Most of the requests we get are love interests. They want to do a love song or something like that, or if it's someone that's far away, they want to play a I Miss You song, that kind of thing. And then I'll dig a little deeper and try to find out what that is. And everything's recorded. We don't put listeners on the air live, nobody does, so we're able to edit and get into some subjects that we sometimes didn't expect to get into. So we can have a 2 or 3 minute interview that may be broken down to 30 to 45 seconds, or maybe a minute the most. Okay.
So tell us about, the original sound recording company and how that came about.
Okay. Well, that was just about in 1950, in the 50s, maybe call it 1957, even a little before that. I just took an interest in the music that I was playing.
Okay.
And people would bring me records and try to get me to play them, of course. And I used to go into a room with all the records that came in, the new ones. And in those days, I played all the hits of the day, which would, be the Penguins and the Dells and some of those kind of acts. even further back than the Dells came later, but right in through there and try to play some of the music of the day. We weren't too much into oldies yet. We were into some of it, but rock and roll was only around for about 5 years. It was rhythm and blues then, and the words rock and roll are often used in those records that came out in the late 40s and early 50s. Louis Jordan had some things like that, and so I hope that answers the question. You're not a pioneer until you've been there a while, so you know, it's been a long time since I felt like a pioneer. I mean, I've been a pioneer for 50 years, so it feels good, and to know, you know, what I'm talking about. And sometimes people dig up a song or a record that goes way back, you know, like you know, Willie Mae Thornton or something like that, and they'll play the original Hound Dog, like when Elvis came out with Hound Dog. Most people didn't know that Willie Mae Thornton did the original Hound Dog. It was written by a good friend of mine, Johnny Otis. We worked together a lot in the 50s. But I mean, as you know, most rock and roll in the beginning were done by black artists, and the white artists emulated the black artists, including Elvis. It was common knowledge that that's where rock and roll came from. I used to have people like Little Richard, and who I think is the real king of rock and roll. He used to say rhythm and blues had a baby, and they named it rock and roll. Little Richard said that, and he's you know, really set the style of rock and roll, that crossover style. I thought he's the real, at least I've been asked that, and I usually say, you know, Little Richard is the real king of rock and roll. Because he was way before Elvis.
Okay. Where do you feel Chuck Berry stands in that situation?
The same thing. I mean, Chuck Berry is a friend of mine, and we haven't seen him in a long time, but when he come out here and play shows for me, we party together after the show. He invited me to his place, and we invited some people from the show, and we had a good time there till 3 or 4 in the morning. So it wasn't just, you know, we got along. We got along well enough to party together. I get invited on those days all the time down to parties in Central Avenue, where most of the people were in Los Angeles, where most of the artists, you know, were living there, and they would invite me over, and I would go, not every night, but, you know,
whenever you could,
a couple times a month.
Yeah,
in the 50s.
That's real cool.
Exciting time, you know. Tony Allen, who did that song Night Owl, he was always a friend of mine. He used to have a lot of parties.
So when it comes to your dedications, I know you did many throughout the years. Was there like a particular dedication that stood out to you the most?
Well, there's some, that kind of pull the heartstrings. There was this fellow that was doing time in one of the high intensity, what do you call it?
Maximum facilities?
Yeah, it was you know, one that had where they put all the hard time guys, and he had been convicted and was in jail for a long period of time. His wife was pregnant, I guess, when he went to jail. And so one time he had his little daughter, who was, I think, 2 years old, and the wife said, can she say hello to her daddy? We're not allowed to take the baby in there to see him, but they do let him listen to the radio. And so I put her on the air, and she said, "I love you, Daddy." And I met him when he came out of jail a few years later, and he said he thought he was a really tough guy, but he said that hearing his own daughter over the radio brought him to tears. So that stands out, and there was a lot of that. After that first time like that, I realized, so I started putting the kids on the air. And a lot of times it was for someone that was incarcerated. So in the L.A. County Jail a number of years ago, they used to have a music playing that everybody could hear, and they said that my show was the only one that the Mexicans and the blacks would tolerate, because they both liked the same music. It was mostly by black artists.
Right.
And so that's interesting that there was a common denominator there.
And so tell us about Frank Zappa and your experience working with him.
Well, Frank, at that time, when he first came to see me, he was a friend of an engineer friend of mine named Paul Buff, who was a really bright guy, a white guy. Him and Frank Zappa were best friends. But Frank was I don't know exactly how old he was, but I would guess him to be 19 or 20. He was Frank Zappa, but he wasn't famous yet, and he used to come around with my friend Paul, who used to help me with my recording studio, a very bright guy, by the way. Okay. And Frank was with him, who was also very bright, and so he was just kind of hanging around. And so, I met him, and he'd hang around my studio at Original Sound probably around in the late 50s. And later on, when he started the Mothers of Invention, he used to play the xylophone, Frank Zappa. Right. And he said to me one day, we used to have the studio on Sunset Boulevard, a recording studio, as well as we used to broadcast out of there at different times on KRLA in those days. And so Frank asked me if he could store his xylophone in my studio, because it was a big cumbersome thing he couldn't carry around. And I said, well, yeah, you can, but I says, I don't want to be responsible for it, but we'll take good care of it. But I said, I'll tell you what, I'll let you store your xylophone free in the studio, but if I ever need a record session with a xylophone on it, you have to play on it.
There you go.
He said, okay. And when we did that song, Memories of El Monte, which he wrote with another member of his band, he said that he wrote the song, and he said this would be great for some xylophone chords. And I says, well, great, you remember our deal? He says, yeah. It's still over there in the corner. So he played on that session, on that record that we put out on Original Sound called Memories of El Monte. It was kind of a regional hit, particularly in L.A.
That song,
yeah, all that montage that I put in there, I put that in there with all the different artists singing and the montage of imitations of, the Penguins. Actually, the Penguins were the artists on that record. So we had 2 or 3 other groups that emulated what was the other songs that we do. If you know that song, there's a spot in there that we break away from the main title and the artists sing little bits of songs. But then of course Frank and I became good friends, and he went on to become very famous and became a big star. And he used to come and see me a lot. And I remember one of the times he was playing over at that place right across from Capitol Records. I think at that time it was called El Capitan, but I don't know what it's called now. Okay. But he was doing a rehearsal there, and he had his girl Moon call me and tell me to drop over during his rehearsal because he hadn't seen me in a long time, Frank Zappa. So I remember when I walked through the door, he had quite an entourage there of 30, 40 people, and they were just standing around, and he saw me walk in the door, and he says, hold everything. He says, here comes Art LABOE. He says, he got me out of jail once.
That's funny.
And I did. It was just, he was making some records that were under the counter a little bit, racy, not racist, but racy, about sex and stuff. Right. And he was selling these things under the counter, and they busted him for it and put him in jail, so I bailed him out. It cost me $300, but I did it.
Oh, that's not bad.
And he remembered it like 20 years later, and he yelled it out there in front of all those people. He was just joking, of course, but he was telling the truth.
Right. That's real cool.
There's a little story for you.
That's cool. So tell us about the ART LABOE Foundation and some of the humanitarian efforts behind that.
Well, we do a lot of stuff on medical research and animals, and mostly it's devoted to a lot of animal people that take care of animals, like World Wildlife Fund and places like that, and a lot of the local places and we also give scholarships to some of the high schools in East LA and South LA. We give away about 10, and that's been going on since 1980. It's just a way of giving back. The ART LABOE Foundation started around 1980, and we're still doing it every year. We give away scholarships and to some of the East LA and South LA, South Central.
So tell us about your latest venture, which is DART Entertainment.
Well, that's something after Original Sound went out of business. The record business became difficult because of the downloading and music going that way, where we couldn't lease the original masters for downloading on computer, because most of the stuff that we did on CD in years past was we negotiated with the major labels. So when we played Rock Around the Clock, it was by Bill Haley, and it was the original master. So we had, those things with all the major record companies. By then we'd been established. But when it came time to digital downloads, they wouldn't lease us those, because they didn't need to lease them to somebody else that maybe could merchandise it in different places that they couldn't. They wouldn't lease us those for download, so that kind of wiped out Oldies But Goodies and that part of our business. So we sold the publishing and masters that we had, ours and a few years back. It's been about 5 years ago. So we actually don't have any music interest now, this minute. But we went out of the record business, and I drifted pretty much back to where I started, which is in the radio broadcasting. And that's my primary business. And I started DART Entertainment with a good friend who had been working with me for a number of years, Dale Berger, and a very bright guy. So we have this company together now, DART Entertainment, and we do radio broadcasting and concerts. So it's not as ambitious as some of the stuff I've done in the past, but I started in radio, and I've kind of gone full circles back, although I've been broadcasting constantly all through the years since 1943.
Cool. So let me ask you this. What does July 17th mean to you?
The number 17 came out. It was interesting. That's the date that I got my star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
That's right.
And it was on July 17th, and it's quite interesting because my star number it's the 1734th star. If you double 17, it comes out to 34.
Right.
So it was on July 17th, and the star number is 1734, and there's 17 all through there. It's quite interesting, but that's what it means to me. That's my lucky number. It always has been. I've always liked it, but when that happened, it was amazing that it coincidentally just happened. I didn't hear it that way at all.
That's the stars align. God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, right on the corner of Hollywood and Highland. In those days, when I got that star in 1981, July 17th, Hollywood and Highland was a major Hollywood corner, but Hollywood and Vine was like the corner. And then later on, when they put the Kodak Theater in there, right near Hollywood and Highland is now the big Hollywood corner, and my star has been there before it was the big Hollywood corner. I had a girlfriend that worked at the Hollywood Theater right near there, and I used to hang out around there a lot. So they let me pick my location for my star.
Okay.
The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce did, and that's where I picked it, right on the corner. So if you're walking across Highland or you're walking across Hollywood Boulevard, I'm right on that corner on the southwest corner.
Nice. That's real cool. So I know, Art, you have an extensive history, and again, we're happy to have you, doing what you're doing. Is there like a movie or documentary in the works?
I have a book in the works, and the documentaries and those things have been talked about a lot. There have been a lot of stories done about me, but not a real documentary. I've appeared in a few documentaries about other people, Richie Valens and others, but at this point, no. I've also done voiceovers in a couple of movies, and where they wanted a voice in there, something that was going on regarding music, or also a couple of movies where they just wanted my voice doing a couple of dedications. But I hope to have my book done very shortly. it's done, actually. It just needs to be edited and a little bit of work, and I've got to do an audio version of the book, too. We've already started, copyrighted the title. It's called The Last Radio Show.
That's cool. So, final questions, but 2 more left. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything else you want to share with your audience?
Just that I appreciate all the great things that have happened to me over the years. I mean, every dream I ever dreamed, I guess, has, come through 100 times or maybe 1,000 times. And, I've got my star on the Walk of Fame. I've had a successful record company. I've had many, many successful radio programs, including the one I'm doing now. I'm on iHeartRadio, which goes all over, and also I've owned a few radio stations, bought and sold, and dreamed about being on the radio, and that certainly came true at a very young age. I was just 18 when I got my first job in KSAN in San Francisco, and so those are my final thoughts, is that I've gone full circle, and now I'm back in radio where I started, but of course on a much bigger scale. Those are my final thoughts, and I'm in touch with my audience that way, where in the record business, unless you're doing concerts, which I always have done, you're really not in touch with your audience on a person-to-person basis. But we're still doing these concerts, at least a half a dozen a year in different cities, and a couple in Los Angeles. We usually do a place that's had many names, but its original name was Blockbuster, over in the town of Devore, right near San Bernardino. Well, you can hear our station, Hot 92.3, all over the IE. Oh, yeah. And I also have, also heard on many other stations that cover that area. But it's that's the big one. It has 10,000 seats, and we've been there 10 years, and every year we fill those seats and have a couple, 3,000 on the lawn. So we've had as many as 19,000 there.
Wow.
I think in 2006 or 7, right in through there.
Nice.
And so, that's the part of what I do now, and I like it. We go out there and I appear on some stations as a guest and talk about the concert, and one that's upcoming, whatever it is. It's exciting always to walk out there and have that many people cheering and screaming for you. It's pretty nice.
I can imagine. So out of all the, dedication that you've made, love songs, is there like a particular song that when you play it, you feel like, you know what, man, this is my jam. I can't live without this particular track because it reminds me of such and such?
Well, it does. That happens a lot because that's all I've done, for the last 70 years, believe it or not. Yeah, I've actually been in radio broadcasting that long. I started when I was 18.
That's so.
It's a hard question to answer, but give it to me again.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one song that you can choose.
Oh, that I get asked that one a lot, and you know what? It's really difficult to pick one. Some of those very early songs, but yet, as you move along into through the years, there's been so many that it wouldn't be fair for me to pick one because there's probably 50 I really like, and I think are great songs done by great artists.
Sure.
And I've been very fortunate to have played with a lot of these artists, playing, having Ray Charles at a concert back in 1959 when he really crossed over to pop music with that What'd I Say. That was a big night at the Palladium when he was really not a big star yet. He was only a rhythm and blues star. And that during that song just crossed over and made him an instant, worldwide star. A lot of other things, I could name that, or I could name, Jackie Wilson, who we played with, and a lot of other, of course, you mentioned Chuck Berry. I partied with him. We partied at his house after the show. He played the Palladium with me in 1971. Nice. And Bo Diddley was on that same show. at the Palladium. So, there's so many that there are, and so much talent. As it broke into as rhythm and blues sort of merged into rock and roll. There's so many, one after the other, and I love them all. So we don't play a lot of that anymore, 50 stuff, but every once in a while we do. Somebody called in, actually, it was the night before last, the lady was riding along, and she says, we're riding along in our car listening to you, and we're having a good time. And I thought, I'm going to play that song by Chuck Berry where the opening line is riding along in my automobile. I pulled it out and played it,
Nice. That's what's up. That's what's up, Art.
I have autonomy. I can play what I want, so that helps.
Definitely.
The program that I do now on Hot 92.3 in Los Angeles, and it goes on iHeartRadio all over the country, it isn't programmed in advance. The listeners help me program it as we go, and we pull out one of the many thousands of songs in our computer, and people can actually call, and I talk to them about what they want to hear, and I usually have something they want. It may not be the exact song when they first called. They want a Miss You song. We got lots of those. They want an I Love You song. We got lots of those. They want a breakup song. I got lots of those. It makes a real connection, as you said earlier, with the listeners because they're participating. And I think that's the key nowadays to entertainment. The audience no longer wants to just stand there and be entertained. They want to participate. It comes from all the electronic gadgets and Twitter and Facebook and all that. They want to become part of it. The program that I do causes that to happen.
Right, and you're the best person that they can learn from because
their voices are on the air, and the people that they're talking about, and that goes on the air. And I have young kids that are 6 and 7 years old. I had one. They did a dedication for a 1-year-old a few nights ago.
Oh, wow!
And I have grandpas and grandmas listening, and sometimes they'll ask for stuff like big bands and stuff that I don't really play. But so I'll talk them into doing something else, like Elvis or something. Stevie Wonder, he's a big favorite of mine.
Nice.
And a good friend too, by the way.
Definitely. Well, hey, that pretty much wraps up our interview here. And again, thank you for
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to do it. I had kind of a good time going over some of this stuff, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the concert.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you for thinking of me for your column and your story in Music Connection magazine.
Well, right now I'm going to bring you one of the stars that's going to be with me when Hot 92.3 and ART LABOE present Chicano Soul Legends, Saturday, December 6th at the Honda Center, Anaheim, California. For details on this concert and possibly some other ones coming up soon, you can go to artlaboe.com and you get all the details, and that'll give you a link to Ticketmaster if you want to buy tickets for Saturday, December 6th, about 20 days from now. So if you don't have your tickets yet, be sure and join the thousands that already do. It's going to be a big night, Saturday, December 6th.